Hello movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Banshees of Inisherin. This one has been on my list since it came out, probably before it came out. I was very excited about this one. I'm a really big fan of Colin Farrell, and I really like Brendan Gleeson, so I knew this is one that I wanted to watch. I didn't get around to actually seeing it when it hit theaters and hit streaming and all of that stuff. So it's taken me a minute to come around to actually sitting down and watching it. I am happy with myself, I guess, that I waited so that I could actually sit and give this one some time, to actually appreciate watching it and not feel rushed into watching it just to be able to cover some other things on the podcast that were coming out around the time that this one did. But I have to say, if I'm completely honest, I'm not exactly sure where I stand with this film. I think the cinematography is absolutely outstanding. It is probably one of the most beautiful films, and I think that just honestly has a lot to do with how beautiful Ireland is just in general. There are a lot of very grand sweeping shots of this little island that the movie takes place on, and it's absolutely breathtaking. It's stunning to behold, and I think the acting also is incredible. Again, like I said, Colin Farrell does an amazing job. I think Brendan Gleeson does an outstanding job as well. I think far and above that, even though he isn't a main character, I think Barry Keoghan does amazing. His character blew me away. It kind of reminded me, his character of Dominic really reminded me of Leonardo DiCaprio's character from What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Not in the sense that his character is meant to be on the spectrum or anything of that nature, but his character is a little bit of an oddball. And I think the way that he presents that character I think personally is the best I have ever seen him in a film. And I've enjoyed him in some other things as well. That being said, I don't quite understand this movie. I have heard a couple of things that say that this is meant to really kind of be an ode to the Irish Civil War that takes place at exactly the same time of this film. It's taking place in 1923, kind of right at the end of when the Irish Civil War would have been coming to a close. And I've heard that this is meant to sort of be a representation of that Civil War, that it kind of started out of something quite small and that the bloodshed was really unnecessary and things of that nature. But I think if you are not intimately familiar with the Irish Civil War, this movie is going to be potentially difficult for you to kind of wrap your head around. I think it's a little bit it's a slower film, but a lot of the kind of underlying messaging, I think, is pretty personal for Ireland in general. And so for someone that is, in the States and kind of outside of that, and where in the United States they don't teach us in school about the Irish Civil War. So I'm not particularly familiar with it. I had to do some Googling kind of after watching this movie just to see some of the particulars and kind of see if I could grasp what was going on inside the movie itself. And I still came away from it not quite sure what the overall message of this film was meant to be, because there isn't a lot of story to the Banshees of Inisherin in the way that I feel like typical movies would have. That being said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this movie. I think that there were a lot of little bits of humor that I was not expecting to really enjoy as much as I did. And again, the character of Dominic, played by Barry, I think was exceptional. And I just absolutely loved seeing him on the screen every time that he was. But as far as the film actually kind of being enjoyable just as entertainment, I'm not sure that it quite passed that. It sort of reminds me, I think I covered another movie earlier this year that was sort of similar with, oh gosh, I can't even remember what the name of the movie was now or like who was in it, but it really was just mostly this woman in the middle of the woods who gets upset at these men for parking on her property. And then it turns into this huge thing where they're like burning her house down. And really, like, I didn't quite understand what the motivation behind a lot of the things that were actually taking place in the movie was. And I ended up walking away just sort of thinking like, that was kind of a waste. And at least with the Banshees of Inisherin, I didn't walk away from it in that way. Like, I think it was at least filmed and directed and acted in a particular way that was incredibly enjoyable. But the story itself might have been a little bit lost on me because I was not aware of a lot of the particulars of what was happening at that time. So I would say if you are not like a huge history buff or you don't enjoy going out and learning things like that, which I do, like I end up getting little worms in my head, I think is what I kind of refer to them as, is that I will watch a movie and then I kind of can't stop thinking about it and I have to sort of Google. And this was one of those movies where I really wanted to Google what was happening with the Irish Civil War and kind of tried to understand a little bit more about Ireland at that time period because I'm not at all familiar with it. And I love, learning new things. And so that is something that this movie definitely gave me, is a little bit more knowledge about some areas that I was not particularly knowledgeable in. And I think it's enjoyable, as a film. You may or may not get that much out of it. It's not going to be an action thriller or anything of that nature. I will say, just as an aside, absolutely do not watch The Banshees of Inisherin if you are slightly sad, depressed in any way. This will absolutely take you down a notch. Like if you are super happy in the morning and you watch this movie, you're not going to be super happy after it. Like it is a particularly emotional and sad and sometimes kind of difficult movie to watch, but I still enjoyed it. So I don't know if that's glowing praise or not, but I would definitely give this one a watch if you are looking for something, just kind of interesting to experience. So those are my thoughts on The Banshees of Inisherin. I would love to know yours if you've seen this film. Subscribe if you want to join the movie nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.